The total area of the farm is around about 1,400 hectares. The history of the farm here, Forest Vale at Mangapla, is my great-great-grandfather took it up in the early 1900s. About 70% cropping, I'd say, which is all winter cereals, lupins and canola, and 30% sheep and wool, all merino flock of about 5,000 merinos. At the moment, we don't have any programs or any new initiatives to reduce carbon on the farm, but you've always got to keep looking at these with new information coming forward, and if the government was willing to give us a bit more incentive to do some of these projects, yes, it might be something to look at.
The Forest Vale farming aggregation has a greenhouse gas emissions output estimated to be around 1,280 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent each year. And this output includes different types of emissions from different agricultural sources. The major type of greenhouse gas emissions from Forest Vale is enteric methane from livestock belching, and the major source is the sheep flock. The Australian Farm Institute modelled some greenhouse gas emissions abatement scenarios for Forest Vale. These scenarios included a general management change in the enterprise structure of this specific farm, a carbon farming policy compliance scenario such as planting trees, and a hypothetical nitrogen fertiliser inhibitor scenario that may become available to grain farmers in the future. One scenario suggests changing the enterprise structure from an autumn lambing method to a spring lambing method and weaning lambs earlier at 2 months instead of 4 months. This general change in management decisions specific to this farm are not necessarily a method that could be used in carbon markets.
We looked at weaning earlier and spring lambing. You've got to work in with the cropping program and everything else, and at the moment autumn lambing suits us just fine with to fit in our cropping and our sheep programs together.
Although this type of enterprise change might not suit Peter's farming operation at the moment, it has started him thinking about ways by which general management decisions can have an impact on greenhouse gas emissions. Another scenario is a carbon sequestration project where a portion of grazing land is planted to trees. International standards for a carbon sink require permanence obligations. In this case, the project would have to run for 100 years.
I believe that that's too long. That's 4 generations. Should be only, I'd say, 2 generations, which is 50 years, and the commitment that the family would have to make wouldn't be quite as daunting.
Peter clearly understands the advantages of trees and carbon sequestration combined with other environment co-benefits such as biodiversity and erosion control. Peter and other farmers who share his concerns might look at carbon sequestration projects in the future that provide flexibility, such as 25-year permanence obligations, and incur discount rates in carbon markets due to the shorter permanence period.
AFI did a scenario on fertiliser inhibitor abatement. It's an improvement, yes, but it's not something that we could spend the extra money on and be sustainable to make it work in the future.
Interestingly, this scenario only provides a whole-of-farm emissions reduction of 1%, but when the cropping enterprises for this specific farm were analysed as standalone, the nitrogen fertiliser inhibitor was estimated to provide a greenhouse gas abatement of 11%. The Robersons have their own methods of reducing the requirement of manufactured nitrogen fertiliser used in crop enterprises.
For the abatement of CO2 on the farm, so that we don't use as much artificial fertiliser, we use lupins in the rotation. The lupins actually fix nitrogen in the soil by little nodules on the roots here, and that gives us a great advantage for the next crop.
One thing that wasn't discussed at the interview, but could be considered in Peter's case, would be a combination of these 3 scenarios at once. This would give Peter's farming aggregation a 10% abatement overall. Whilst Peter may not feel that carbon farming projects are suited to his farms at the moment, he can see a future for carbon farming in Australia, particularly when guidance on how farmers can participate in carbon farming projects becomes more available.
The CFI farming program in the future needs some more initiatives to educate the older farmers. The average age of a farmer is 60 to 65, so you need to bring the older generation along to understand what the carbon farming is. But I think we need to do these sort of things to try and educate people on the farms as well as in the cities as what farmers do. We look after land. If we abuse our land and degrade it, it won't give us the return that we need to live.
The carbon farming videos have been produced by the Australian Farm Institute and supported by funding from the Australian Government.